podcast listeners and YouTube watchers. I'm Chase Lee, the co-host of the Real Me and Colon, a movie podcast, and a contributing reviewer on DallasMovieScreenings.com. And the movie I'm going to be reviewing right now is Stan and Ollie. Now, this one comes from Sony Pictures Classics and is directed by John S. Baird. And this one tells the real-life story of Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, a comedy duo from around 1929 to about 1955. And kind of the likes of Abbott and Costello, they were in movies, they would perform on stage, they would do, comedy bits, they would sing, they would dance. They were just a really entertaining duo that had a pretty large fan base, considering the fact that they were in the same company as like a Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and, Abbott and Costello. They still held their own, and they were still able to garner a following. Now, this movie kind of follows their last tour, if you will, in the 50s. It's, post-war in Britain, and so they go over there to kind of do a tour, and, they were really big back in the day. Something happened, and so they kind of reignite their team once again to kind of go on one last, hoorah in the comedy tour. So, going into this movie, I was a little surprised that I was non-existent in this knowledge, because I didn't know who Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy were. I always knew, the previous silent film and slapstick comedy people that I mentioned earlier. Those were the people I knew. I never knew about these guys, and so it was really nice to kind of see a story based on a comedy duo that I have never heard of, and I was really curious to see, how they would, kind of interact with one another, and how their comedy would, kind of come across, and just their life story, and I was just really curious about everything that was going on. And I saw the trailer, to the movie, and I thought it looked charming. I thought it looked like just a really nice little movie, and I saw the movie, and it is a delightful movie. I like it quite a bit, and it definitely just proves to me that I need to do more research on slapstick and silent era kind of comedy stars, and even like post-silent era, and kind of brush up on my history a little bit, because I absolutely love just the presence of a Laurel and Hardy, Stan and Ollie, proper. And so, so getting into the movie, what I like about it, on a visual front, it's set briefly in the 30s. It's mostly set in the 50s, so the production design, the costuming, and the sets, they just look so vibrant and so inviting with its colors and its designs, and it really just kind of sets you into that mood of a film that's set in the 1950s. And so I really do like the visual aesthetic to the movie, and I think, as everything's going on, and even when they're performing their shows on stage, there's just a nice little visual pop that kind of accompanies the story. And I think that is actually where the meat of this movie is. It is the story, and it's the characters, because for someone like me that's never even heard of these guys, it was nice to really kind of get into who they are in terms of how their comedy was, how they were outside of shows, how they were inside of shows, what were their wives like, what were they like when they all interacted. And so we got all that in this movie. And so, for a movie that actually takes place like later in their life, and actually after a devastating thing happens, I still felt like there was a friendship there. I still felt this chemistry that was brewing between these two guys, and it was actually really kind of palpable to watch, and just to know that their back and forth was comedy gold. And a lot of people really enjoyed their company, and I felt the warmth, I felt the presence of a Stan and Ollie as characters, and I also found it to have a lot of pathos and a lot of sadness behind these characters, because a lot of people don't realize when you think of comedy, you think of ha ha ha, funny, funny, funny. But believe it or not, comedic actors, actresses, comedians, stand-up, they have the most sadness behind them. And a lot of people don't get to explore that. And I think this movie did that, and it wasn't like a super raw, emotional movie. It is PG. We have to tone it down for a little bit, for families, which I think is great, by the way. I don't think you need to go super hard and emotional I think the delicacy of the performances of Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly really did bring that emotional weight to it, and it was just right. There were several scenes where it got me, and I was like, I understand these characters a whole lot more just from them being vulnerable towards one another. And so, even though they had their fights and they weren't technically friends in the past, but they were forced to work together, but they grew this friendship, everything just hit for me in terms of characters. Character. That's what this movie relies on, and its story, and I absolutely love that aspect. Because speaking of the story, I liked when they were just interacting, like I said, beyond the shows, and even though the comedy didn't work for me necessarily in the shows, I still like seeing their chemistry bounce off of one another, and it was really fun to watch. They're definitely an entertaining duo. To get into the acting, I briefly touched upon it. They're superb. I love John C. Reilly and Steve Coogan in this movie. They are definitely distinct as a duo, to where, like, if I had my eyes closed and Oliver Hardy was talking, I'd be like, that is definitely Ollie, and if Stan and Laurel was talking, I'd be like, that is definitely Stan. But for some weird reason, even though they're kind of two separate people, they do come together and they make it work, and I think that all has to do with the performances. Steve Coogan is great. He's always been a great comedic actor, but he knows how to bring the kind of subtle emotional beats to his characters in any of his movies, and John C. Reilly is the same way. John C. Reilly is the same guy that was in Step Brothers as he was in Magnolia. I mean, this guy is all over the place. He does drama. He does comedy. According to my girlfriend from 5 minutes ago, he was in Chicago. I didn't know that. So that's what I'm saying. The guy is such an enigma. He can just kind of put himself in anything, and it works. And when you see the actual footage of Stan and Ollie during the credits after the movie, it's kind of uncanny. Like, he looks exactly like him, and that is awesome. So the performances really, really work. And, their wives aren't really in it that much of the movie, but I do think the people that were cast as Stan and Ollie's significant others, one of them was hilarious to watch, which was Stan's wife, and then, of course, Ollie's wife was really sweet and really caring and really supportive of her husband. It was just a really great partnership that I really liked, and they were really fun to kind of bounce off one another. And then, of course, they have their I think it's his manager. He's in it very briefly, not really anything significant, but it's mainly just those four, and I think they all four pulled them off. And the music was also kind of a great accompaniment to the kind of comedy of the 20s and 30s, very very piano based, very very fresh and very just kind of lively type of music that not only played during their shows but also throughout the entire movie. And then when it got really kind of dramatic, it kind of reeled back on the music, and I thought it was just kind of like a nice nice transition when it would go into those scenes. So yeah, overall, and not only that, just to wrap it up, the pace of this movie is really refreshing. It is 98 minutes. You subtract 5 minutes off of that for credits or wherever, so it's a straight hour and a half. And that's such a perfect amount of time to tell these guys' stories and really kind of show us just a brief little window into what these guys did. And you know what? After watching this movie, I want to go back and watch some of their movies or some of their stage shows, whatever they have available on media to watch. I want to see it because of them. It is a nice little movie. I like it. It is, like I said, simply a delight. I'm going to give this movie a B, a solid B. That's what you're going to get from me. So what did you guys think of Stan and Ollie, or have you even heard of it? Comment in the places right below my face and let me know. And as always, guys, I'm Chase Lee, and tune in next time for whatever I review next. I will see you guys later.